You know, in my opinion, the debate is not so great. But the people who are in those debates, they are great. And we're more interested in people than we are in ideas. And yet, we don't want people to have to abandon ideas. We just want them to be talking about their ideas and learning to respect each other. So, be a great person, not just somebody attached to what you think of as a great debate. That's what I'm talking about. Are you a wicked sinner? Do you resist the Spirit of the Lord? Are you rebellious? Do you want the ground to open up and swallow you up into hell like you deserve? Then I invite you to go to church. But if you're a human being, you love people, and you feel that love is important and people are dignified, then maybe what you really need to do is really kind of just talk about the various ideas. Join us at the place where we accept theists and atheists, and we talk to everybody, and we reason out various ideas, and sometimes we even change. And we're not worried about being rebellious. We're not worried about being evil. It's not that we don't care about right or wrong. We care about being who we are. We care about not us and them. We talk about this and that. And, it's not about all that religious stuff, At NCG, we're not asking people to abandon being atheists. We're not asking them to abandon being theists. In some ways, we're asking them to realize that if that's what's working for them, that's perfectly fine. But this idea that this is what really ought to be working for others is not necessarily all that well founded. We're interested in getting people to understand each other, to understand those ideas, and to be open to thinking about these ideas, open to changing if that's what works for them. But we're not interested in pulling it away from people. We're not interested in the great debate as if there's a side here that ought to win. What we are interested in is understanding where people come from so that we can actually even appreciate those who are different from us and appreciate where they're coming from, even if it doesn't seem to work for us.
Big question of the night. You ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
Okay. Why is it that I have this old shiny black microphone and you got this nice new matte finish microphone?
It has to do with my fabric. I mean, look at what you,
like the fabric of your being?
Look at what you have on. I mean, my goodness.
Hey, can I please get a new matte microphone? Crew member.
I mean, you need to...
So you're saying you got this microphone because you're wearing a suit?
Right.
Okay. Hey, where's my suit?
My threads. He's learning.
Come on in the shot. Tell me about can these cameras play jingle bells? I noticed they're professional. Signs of professional quality. Number one, camera plays music when you're touching the screen. What's the second sign of a professional camera?
Money.
Well,
it's called green.
We're out of luck.
Every man has formed an opinion. An opinion is like an asshole. Everybody's got one.
That's a good sock with a good shoe. Let's move on.
Jesus.
We're standing here in front of our
our
local penitentiary / retirement home.
What's your story?
I came down here from Jacksonville. My mama was born and raised here.
You're wearing a cross. What does that mean to you?
My Father in heaven, I believe He helped me with everything else, everything I need. He helped me with my problem.
Do you ever feel like He's not meeting your needs since you're on the street?
No. He always meets my needs. No matter what goes on, I find help. He always with me. Because at His time, He don't never give you what you want. He give you what you need. He always meets my needs.
Hopefully you're relaxed tonight And hopefully you're counting us as friends because we so love you. Thanks for being here tonight. Hello, Chad. Hello, Vincent. It's been a long time, Vincent. I mean, my goodness. I need that picture with SpongeBob and my daughter together. That would be nice. Give me a call or something. I'd like to get together with you on that. Before I bring Terry and Daryl in, and we're still waiting on Daryl, let me see if he's anywhere close. He isn't. I want to make some comments. I watched a particular video by Aaron Ra earlier, and I love Aaron Ra. He's got a big heart. I mean, he's a big teddy bear, to be honest with you. And, there was a time in which he made a point that sometimes you have to have a person like him with the elbows, just trying to make entrance for other people in a conversation. And I so agree with that. Ozzy Mandias, he agreed and made a beautiful point about Aaron, that is his contribution to the greater conversation. But in this particular video, and I'm not picking on Aaron, I'm just trying to suggest something different. That's all I'm doing. Aaron, he lives in Dallas, and he has people like Kenneth Copeland there in Dallas, and I can understand why a person would be concerned about those listening to Kenneth Copeland. I get that. I can understand why he would be concerned about those people going to the Potter's house and listening to T.D. Jakes. I get that. I can understand why he would be concerned about people listening to Robert Tilton. I get all that. I mean, without question, I get that. But I think that Aaron Ra needs to, and I hope he's listening, or a friend of his, other friends are listening of his, I wish that he would talk to people like, let me just suggest one person. I mean, this guy, he's a very gracious man. He's not going to be an asshole. He's not going to be unkind. He's going to be very understanding, and he's very good. That is, at being a theologian. He's not an apologist. He's just a very, very well-disciplined theologian. His name is Bishop John Shelby Spong. I like his work. In one sense of the word, he could be authoring a brighter light than what we see in Jesus within that particular mythology. He states, and this is the bishop, God is not a being external to the world, prepared to invade life from on high to establish the divine will on earth. That claim, so familiar in the religious circles, is nothing but an expression of the yearning present in the childhood of our humanity to explain the inexplicable. He goes on and he makes this statement, and I do resonate with this statement that he makes. He said, God is rather a process into which we live. He goes on to state life, love, and being are the operative words. What actions expand life? That would be the question. What actions increase love? What actions enhance being? That is the arena in which good must ultimately be separated from evil. So he goes on and he gets into a lot of trouble with, these radicals. And any, please understand this. I'm not defending Christianity. I walked away from Christianity, as most of you guys know, but I'm simply saying there are some very good people in Christianity. There are some very, very good scholars within Christianity, like Bishop John Shelby Spong. And when you're always talking to the radicals, it reminds me of trying to find out something about Islam, and you're always talking to the people who represent that extreme position that we refer to as ISIS, right? I mean, these people have been radicalized. It's obvious that T.D. Jakes, it's obvious that Creflo Dollar, it's obvious that, Mr. Jeffers, it's obvious that all of these people that I've mentioned tonight exclude the bishop here, have been radicalized. And so my question would be, what would happen if Aaron Ra and others, that is within the atheistic movement, because Aaron claims to be a Gnostic atheist. I don't know why he's gone that far. I think it's not a good position at all. It's not one you can defend or even reason through. I mean, why would someone claim to know that there isn't or is a God? I mean, either way, it doesn't make sense. But my point is, if we look at people like John Shelby Spong, and he states things like this: our ethical answers will never be found within a code of yesterday. Now, what he's talking about, he's clearly talking to Christians. He's trying to say, Christians, we can't look back, that is, into what was codified. We can't look at that and say that that's a part of our faith any longer. He makes the point they will always be found in the struggle to live fully, to love beyond the boundaries of our security, and the affirmation found at the depth of our being. Did we then dismiss the great codes of the past? No. He's not talking about dismissing the codes, but we also do not endow them with the status of ultimate and unchanging laws. We do, however, ascribe to them the wisdom of the ages, and we give to our ancestors. That's very important. In other words, here's a theologian who is quite merciful and quite gracious. We give to our ancestors who codified those laws the courtesy of our attention. I'm hoping that people in the future will look back at us and be so gracious and kind. With that said, I'm hoping that there will be a different discussion going on that is within the realm of the great debate. I'm hoping that atheists will start talking to theologians who truly know something about theology and its evolution. Now, when you talk to Dr. Spong, you're going to find that this guy is pro-evolution. You're going to find that he does articulate, in one sense of the word, creation. You could call him a creationist, but not after the order of what you see on the radical side of Christianity. And so I'm no longer a Christian, but I do want to be extremely courteous, that is, with my attention to those who do hold positions that differ with mine. And so let's talk a bit about being ethical. That is, in how we move forward, that is, as a species. Should we fight one another? Should we put down one another and become toxic? That is, with our language toward each other, or should we find a better approach? Some people are very entertained because someone gets thrown underneath the bus. I don't know if that's not a sociological or a psychological problem. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when you see people cheering because someone threw another person under the bus simply because they have a different view, are we saying that we're unwilling to be diverse? In other words, if we make the claim that diversity is healthy, you know, when you have a conservative who can make a point, you have a liberal who can make a point, and it doesn't become an us versus them mentality, but it becomes a this versus that conversation. In other words, it's possible tonight that a conservative can sharpen the pencil of a liberal, and a liberal can sharpen the pencil of a conservative. The same thing is true with a theist. A theist can sharpen the pencil of an atheist, and an atheist can sharpen the pencil of a theist. And this has happened in John Shelby Spong's life. It's clearly seen that so many people have been influential, that is, in the bishop's life. But this guy hasn't become radicalized. And so my question is, if there is a great debate, should we not walk toward? That is a debate that does have intellectual honesty and a lot of intellectual charity. See, I'm concerned that when you have two people stating their positions, I'm concerned that if we continue down the road we're going now, that is in the great debate, it's as if we're waiting to make our points known and we're not listening. There's a lot of value in listening. In other words, I'm not trying to convert any of you tonight. I'm simply trying to make a point. You don't have to agree with me to be friends. You don't have to agree with me to have a conversation. But in order for a conversation to go somewhere productive, it needs to be civil. And I'm not convinced that what I'm seeing on YouTube and other platforms, that the conversation is civil. And yes, that concerns me. And I'm just trying to relax. I would rather talk about golf. I would rather talk about this Titleist. Man, I love hitting this ball. I'm a new golfer and having a blast playing golf. I picked up a Ping crossover. It's a 4. And I think it has 21, 23 degree. When it comes to the loft and all that, I'd love to talk about that because it seems like, wow, I can get great distance and yet, you know, I can get my carry, you know, out there, and that's important. But we're not talking about golf right now. I'm wearing my golf hat, but I didn't get to play golf, unfortunately, today. But I wish that we could have a chat. In fact, John Shelby Spong, and let me double check to see if Daryl's here yet. He's not. But John Shelby Spong stated, how did the gospel ever get so distorted that it became the primary source of self-depreciation and guilt? Think about that. Those of you who have gone to church Think about what took place with you. How did the gospel ever get so distorted that it became the primary source of self-depreciation and guilt? How many times did you hear that you were a sinner, totally unrighteous, wicked, wretched? How many times were you told that, by some person who was so radical, they took everything in a literal sense? There's none good, no, not one. Your righteousness is as filthy rags. John Shelby Spong asks this question: how did the idea of the God of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus devolve into this? Is life embraced, made whole, or saved by the threat of the punishment of hell, or even by the promise of rewards of heaven? Now, this is a theologian, but I have to be honest. He's trying to nuance that theism is dead. He's admitting that the argument of saying there is a God, that's dead. He simply wants to use the term and move from there. In other words, I keep saying that God is but an abstraction of an idea by which we orient ourselves to create a functional society. And yes, there are many other ideas that we can do the same thing with. Spong states, if our goal in life and in religion is to escape punishment or to gain reward, have we not failed to escape our own survival-driven self-centeredness? See, Spong is not stupid. He's not dumb. He's not ignorant. He's in the know. So, Aaron Ra is talking to Eric Hovind. Talking about the extreme radicals within Christianity. And today, we have a guy like Bishop John Shelby Spong, which has not appeared with Aaron Ra. And I'm not picking on Aaron Ra. I'm trying to encourage Aaron Ra because he's a good person. He wants to see the best in humanity. I'm simply trying to appeal to those of you who love him like I do. Let's encourage one another to get with people who think differently, who haven't been radicalized, and let's have a conversation that will actually sharpen our pencil. I'm not a theist. I'm not an atheist. Hopefully some of the things that I say sharpen maybe your pencil, maybe it doesn't. And I'd love to have the content that is beside our shows, underneath our shows in the archives. I would love to have all of that as something that sharpens my pencil, because so many of the comments that are left by all of you guys, wow, it really challenges me. And don't think that I don't read the comments. I do. I read them because I have a lot of respect for you. I may not agree with your opinion or take on this or that, but I'm not going to throw you under the bus, and hopefully you're not trying to throw me under the bus, and hopefully we're not into broad stroking and saying, oh, all Christians are like Bob Tilton. Hopefully we're not broad stroking and saying all theists are like Eric Hovind. Hopefully we're not broad stroking and saying that all Christians are like Seitan Bruggencate. It's alarming that we take people who are extremely dysfunctional and we make them into the stars of theism. That is really crazy. Why are we taking the dysfunctional and highlighting them as the major players of this modality that we call Christianity. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There are some brilliant people in Christianity, and I think that it would be wise for atheists to show a lot of respect for so many brilliant people. I'm not a Christian, but I have a lot of respect for so many smart, I'm talking about extraordinarily brilliant people within the framework of Christianity. There are some scholars there that are just dynamic. And yes, they say things that motivate me still to this day. And I like that. And yes, atheists inspire me as well. Not all, some. Not all in Christianity inspire me. Some do, some don't. The radicals have never inspired me. And yes, it's easy to pick on the weak, the feeble-minded people. That is in Christianity. You know, it's easy to make an argument against, you know, what Seitan Bruggencate and others are peddling. But why would anyone feel as if that's even worth spending time with? I mean, that's not a challenge. If you want to challenge yourself, I wake up every morning wanting to read a new book because I want the author to challenge me. I need to be challenged on a daily basis. If you want to grow, if you really want to go somewhere, learn, you know, the principle of get a lot of books, start reading, and allow what you're reading to challenge what you think to be true. Simply take a piece of paper and write down what you think to be true, and take whatever topic that you're reading, that you wrote down, write whatever you think about a particular topic, and go check out, 15 to 20 different books on that topic written by scholars, and see if you're not challenged. You will be. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that let's pick the best of Christians. Let's get the best scholars. And it doesn't even have to be the best scholars. We're talking about some wonderful people who know how to nurture, people who know how to love, people who know how to feed people during hurricanes. But that's not just true within Christianity or theism. That's true within atheism. Let's find the best that is in people, the best people at doing this and that, and let's get involved in that discussion so we can raise the bar a bit in the great debate. So, hopefully I've said something that resonates with you. I'm going to give this over to Terry and try to get Daryl in here. I don't know where Daryl is, but I'm getting ready to call him, okay? So, Terry, am I making sense to you?
Sure. I think the one thing, because I have a pretty dark and abusive sense of humor, when you said about feeding people in hurricanes, my first thought was, wonder what they feed people in hurricanes.
Hey, I just wanted... Okay, I just wanted to make a statement here before we go too far. And I'm here alone in the studio because of the COVID-19 thing, okay? I'm trying to be safe. I'm trying to keep everyone who participates in this studio to be safe. I'm going to go into the control room, make a call, trying to get Daryl on. So you take it away, Terry. Make it far more interesting than I have. Love you.
Well, it's No Pressure Monday. I think what's interesting, and I've been watching the conversation in the side box, and it's sometimes I think it would be easier to not know what people are thinking, because then it's easier just to state your mind, and people can just go, he's an idiot. wow, I wish he was my dad, or, you know, somewhere in between, but usually there's no in between. It's either one of those things or another. I came into this for what the heck, you know, I'll give my testimony. That'll give me some time while Dr. Jones is doing what he's doing. I came into Christianity kind of through the back door. I was raised in a Lutheran church, which was kind of like nothing back then. It was just, you know, what I did on Sunday, put on the only decent clothes I had, and then they shoved me off to church so my parents could argue while I was gone. And then they told me a few things in there, but pretty much the form of the service taught me more about their form of Christianity than the pastor did. And the pastor was just out to lunch. And he, you know, in hindsight, I look back and go, yeah, he really was. So I was confirmed at 13, which was, you know, the goal when you were in Minneapolis back in those days. You were either a Catholic or a Lutheran, pretty much. Very minor percentage was anything else. And I became a confirmed Lutheran, and just about the same time I became an atheist, because I didn't see any sign of God anywhere out there. I saw more of a sign of God in nature, if anywhere, than I did in the church and the people that pretended that God was sort of there. And I stumbled through that from 13 to about 20 when I started. And I never quit looking. I was looking all the time. And I came into this study of the cults and the occult. And this is pre-internet, if you can imagine, in such a world where you couldn't just look things up. You had to drive places and, you know, get books from libraries when they were open and things like that. Sometimes they weren't there. Not to be confused with my tablet, where I have about 2,000 books in my tablet right now. Nothing like that. You know, you had to go get the book, you had to check it out. You had limited time to get through the contents and take notes, typically on a spiral notebook. And I just compiled all this stuff, and I didn't even know what kind of questions to ask. I got into the various cults. I got into study of the occult itself. I had an interesting thing in my life. I started working at Bethany Fellowship as an electrician. They did lots of work. They sent missionaries out around the world, and I wasn't a Christian at the time myself. And they had the various services they did. The people that were missionaries lived on site. They had a church on site. They had a school on site. K through 12 school, and they also had a university on site. They had printing press, all the stuff that went with that. So there was lots of work. So I was working around all these Christians, and I myself was an atheist at the time. It was an interesting exposure because I got to see how these people really were. I mean, how genuine they were. And one of the things I got to do, which was pretty cool, I got to sit down with Walter Martin. Both before and after I became a Christian, I got to sit down with Walter R. Martin, who was a Bible answer man. He was also the author of The Kingdom of the Cults, and he was somebody I could just talk to, just like, you know, I sat with him at lunch every day, and I would talk to him about what I was studying. He would talk to me about, you know, a different view of those things, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I got involved in Christianity. I became a Christian. I was born again, saved, and all that stuff. Started going to a church, started going there, actually. Then I ended up in a more progressive church in downtown Minneapolis. It was extremely well known at the time. I went up in prominence there. I did a couple of missionary trips to the field. I was studying to be a pastor. And I knew enough about the Bible. I was a rabid reader, and I poured through the Bible about 60 or 70 times. All the versions I get my hands on in Spanish. And I came to realize that what I was reading in the Bible, I knew it didn't make sense. I knew it was an old book. I knew it wouldn't align with the modern day, but I also realized that it not only didn't align, they weren't even aligning with it. They were just doing their own thing. Of course, that's not unusual in denominations. So I brought something up to them. This is, bear in mind, I was a Christian. I was a fundamentalist Christian at the time. I brought up to them, and I was in the leadership in the church, that they were taking up an offering, which is understandable when you're trying to run a place. It does take money, but they were taking it up, and they were obligating the people and referring to it as a tithe. 10%, a tenth or 10%. I brought up to them that that was an Old Testament practice to cover the Levitical priesthood, and it's not something that was supposed to be brought ahead into the New Covenant. And I think if I'd gone in there and thrown a bomb in the room, it couldn't have gone over worse. They set me aside. They told me I was no longer able to run any meetings or whatever. They gave me 3 months. I was supposed to come to the services and be a good boy and with my family. I had a wife and 3 children at the time. I was supposed to come in there and do that, and then it would be okay. And I did that for about, I think, the 3rd week. In the middle of a service, I looked at her and she looked at me, and we took our kids and we collected them and we went home and we never went back. And I didn't really leave Christianity, but I left the church. And the thing about it was, and when you're that involved in, I'm explaining this because people don't really sometimes understand what it means to believe. And Daryl has a heck of a story too, that, I've heard parts of, that when you're that involved, when your life is so wrapped in there, I'm running home Bible studies. I'm a missionary. I'm preaching sermons. I'm at times 3 major large services a week, and all of a sudden it's gone. Nothing there. Absolute vacuum. And as was the way of the church, they rejected me fully. It was like 2 or 3 people that we knew. I knew hundreds of people. The next day, 3 of them would talk to me. They weren't very happy about it. So time I learned that, that if I wandered in the wilderness and God was real, he wouldn't desert me and I would be okay, and all that stuff that you think of those times. And over time, I grew away from the need to dogmatically pursue my faith. And in time, I started to substitute some of the things that I believed for better versions of the truth. I was always scientific about my approach to things, which sounds pretty ridiculous, I know, if you're in a fundamentalist church, but it's true. People that have known me for a while, I see Daniel Drake was online here this evening, and Daniel and I go back at least 10 years through Facebook groups. He's seen me be brutally honest at times when all I wanted to do was lie or vanish. But in the attempt to tell the truth, because we're living forward in time. This is an organic process of this belief in things, the substitution of one thing for another. And I'm not an atheist and I'm not a theist, but I've come to realize that the dependency that people have on one of these systems. Before the show tonight, Dr. Jones and I were talking, and I mentioned to him something that I remembered back from the Christian days. Oswald Chambers, missionary to Africa, didn't really want to be remembered, but he was remembered, and they chopped up his sermons into devotionals. And one of the things he talked about was not becoming a necessity for another person's soul. And I was mentioning to Dr. Jones before the show, I said, that's an important thing. Because in atheism, you ended up with the 4 horsemen. And Hitchings was a good writer. He was a good speaker. It's a loss when anyone dies, especially when somebody's articulate and helps people. But if atheism is so intuitive, if it's such an automatic thing to know, we shouldn't need to have preachers and evangelists and charlatans that run atheism. Atheism should be so automatic. It's like, you finally quit believing the lie. You take the red pill, you wake up in the real world. You don't need anyone to explain the real world. Plato's allegory of the cave. It takes you a little while to get your eyes used to the light, but after that, you should be able to tell a tree and a duck and things like that for yourself. And I see the same dependence that Christians had carried over into atheism, where they create this incredible dependency on needing to have this feeding from an outside source, and it's disturbing, because I don't think that people realize that in many cases, and it's certainly excusable, it's certainly understandable, but I don't think that people realize that they've just they've given up one habit. They've quit doing this drug, and they're doing this drug instead, but they're still doing drugs. And
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, well, please do.
Okay. There was a comment made, and I'm certainly listening to you, and I've been trying to get Daryl on the phone, but he is not able to connect because they don't have any internet connection where he lives right now, and so it's quite tough. There's a gentleman in the chat. His name is Daniel Drake. He says, "Hi, Terry. Love you, man. You've made a huge difference in my life just through knowing you, brother." I thought you would want to hear that. I think that's very, very kind. It's very telling. That is about who Terry is. He is making a difference in a lot of people's lives, and we should be able to see that. Hopefully we can. And so I just wanted to jump on here and make that statement. Hopefully that makes sense to you, Terry.
Oh, yeah, I'm working out my own lack of salvation in fear and trembling. But it's really sad when you realize that you're using all and drop. See, there I go, joking again. You drop a Bible reference, if nobody gets it, I go, what the heck's he talking about? Yes, that was a Bible reference. I thought, well, you know, you were talking earlier, and I was going to come on and say that I'm crucified in Christ, and nevertheless I live, yet not I, Christ that lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. You were talking about how people feel the need to abase themselves, the self-deprecation that seems to be just how we're supposed to approach everything. I remember people doing wonderful things for me, Christians doing wonderful things for me. I thank them, and they would defer the thanks of going, no, thank you, Bob. But they were afraid to accept thanks. And therefore they were afraid to, assume the credit. And it's really sad because people were, and this is the thing about thinking about Christianity as people as being just horrific people. I thought a really fantastic thing this last week was this march. Franklin Graham did this prayer thing in Washington. I don't know what you want to call it exactly. Enormous crowd gathered, but these people, they were all, I mean, some of them were older than you and I, Dr. Jones, if you can imagine such a thing. And and many of them were, and they're all happy, and they're quiet, and they're going, we just felt we needed to come here. And they came from all over the country.
Right.
Ridiculously large crowd. And
I'm really not a big fan of Franklin, but I am a fan of what he does, that is in rebuilding homes and contributing to people who are without food and all of that. Let me make a point, because I've been trying to nuance. There are some, not just a handful, a lot. There are many, 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 many Christian theologians who are worth listening to. We've been talking about Bishop John Shelby Spong tonight. He stated atonement theology, especially in its most bizarre substitutionary form, presents us with a God who is barbaric, a Jesus who is a victim, and it turns human beings into little more than guilt-filled creatures. I want you to listen to what Dr. Spong is saying here. He's saying the phrase, Jesus died for my sins, is not just dangerous. It's absurd. Now, this is a Christian theologian, a very well-disciplined Christian theologian, a very popular Christian theologian, and I'm just nuancing the Four Horsemen and others like Aaron Ra and others who are atheists need to have him on their shows instead of the radicals out there. This guy saying the phrase, Jesus died for my sins, is not just dangerous, it's absurd. Atonement theology is a concept we must escape. And so if Christianity is an extraordinarily large modality, and it is, and if it's been around for a long, long time, and you find someone like Bishop John Shelby Spong, who is in a sense, trying to get people to move forward. My question is, why not have him on your show? He's going to be on our show, hopefully soon. But I would like to see the conversation in the great debate not be so much about theism and atheism, but climb a little bit higher and get at the question, which is another show. But I want to put some things out tonight concerning what Spong has been saying, because if we are going to continue moving forward with the truths that are emerging from facts, those are my words, not Spong's. But the following question that Spong posed should not rock our boat. Here's his question. Is the reality of transcendence, otherness, and God dependent on the truth of ancient mythology? Let me ask that question again. This is not my question, but Spong's question. Is the reality of transcendence, otherness, and God dependent on the truth of ancient mythology? It's a good question. And so we're talking about a theologian who is not afraid to ask extraordinarily good questions. We're not talking about a theologian or a Christian who claims to be a theist. But he is still talking about God. How is he talking about God? If I can move back up to what I read at first, maybe some of you guys who were not here at the beginning, he says God is not a being external to the world, prepared to invade life from on high to establish the divine will on earth. That claim, so familiar in religious circles, is nothing but an expression of the yearning present in the childhood of our humanity to explain blah, blah, blah. He poses this, Spong does. God is rather a process into which we live. Life, love, and being are the operative words. What actions expand life? That's the question. What actions increase love? That's the question. What actions enhance being? That's the question. This is the arena in which good must ultimately be separated from evil. He keeps nuancing every time that he states something within the framework of Christianity. Our ethical answers will never be found within the code of yesterday. That's clear. He's trying to get people to look within the Christian framework. Let's look forward, not backward. They will always be found in the struggle to live fully, to love beyond the boundaries of our security, and the affirmation found at the depth of our being. Do we then dismiss the great codes of the past? His answer is no, but we also do not endow them with the status of ultimate and unchanging laws. We do, however, ascribe to them the wisdom of the ages and give to our ancestors who codified those laws the courtesy of our attention. That's it. So he's simply trying to nuance. We're simply going to give them the courtesy of our attention and move on. And so I don't find that that is something that isn't good. In fact, I would argue that what Spong is doing, he's doing more things that are positive for those who find themselves within Christianity than the atheists who keep attacking the radicals within Christianity. I want you to think about that. I mean, show after show after show. Let's go after Eric Coven. Let's go after Saitin Brugacade and all of that. I mean, it turns into a circus. I mean, is that what really turns you on, is listening to someone who knows absolutely nothing that is about the biblical corpus? Spong is an excellent exegete. And he's willing to put things together that have actually a basis in fact. That's why he's not trying to lead people back, that is, to what was codified in the past. He's trying to inspire people to move forward. I don't see anything wrong with that. Do you? And so I would like to read some of your comments as Terry gives us his commentary right now. Go for it, Terry.
What you're talking about, and it brings something to mind, and I don't want to derail anything here much, but it is worth derailing something a little bit, or perhaps bringing two concepts together, the concept of the value of recognizing how we got here through, if indeed we were processed through Christianity as individuals, but the recognition that our culture was processed through it is essential to understanding who we are now. It's knowing how we got here. I quoted Dylan yesterday that I remember every face of every man who put me here. And I do, by the way, especially the ones that weighed more heavily on my life, or maybe more so the ones I was in opposition with than the ones I was in agreement with or willing to follow to something. I've never been a very good follower. I never played well with others, and if you will. But when we forsake these touchstones that we've had to go past, I'm not going back to fundamentalist Christianity. I don't hold to most of what they had. But the less I hold to that, the more the story in Genesis becomes pertinent to me. The more I can derive something from it, because it's no longer anything that I even need to regard as being factual. So I can look at it as a parable. I can look at it as a brief allegory through which I look at it and I go, okay, so life was supposed to be fairly simple. You're placed in a relatively perfect, well, it's supposed to be literally perfect place. But, God, who knew the beginning from the end, knew this wasn't going to work out. Puts in the garden two main trees. They could eat all sorts of stuff, but there's two things that are really critical. The one is the tree of life, which if you ate it, you could live forever, eating life. And then the other one was the tree of the knowledge of good, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So if you ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, you'd die. Now, you go, well, what do people do? What is law about? What does society decide on? What are arguments fought over? Good and evil, all the time. Good and evil, good and evil. There is contained in this, it's like any good mythological short story. You put these people there and they go, okay, well, we could eat this fruit, walk around naked, temperature's perfect, and life is good and we're alive. Or we could learn about good and evil and screw up humanity for the rest of time. So they went, oh, let's do that instead. It's what people tend to do. It's a conceptual touchstone that we can look back on, realize our inclinations, and that's echoed in the Bible. That story is echoed repeatedly, and I've set before you today the way of life and the way of death. Therefore, choose life that you might live. This constant choice of life, and just forsaking knowing so much junk in favor of understanding life, in favor of pursuing life. It's a constant thread that runs through the whole Bible. If you see the Bible as all bad or that there were people in there that chopped people up. Well, they were crazy kings and stuff, but crazy kings chop people up historically anyway. That's just what people did back in those days. But it's trying to put a different spin on things, and I'm not making an excuse for the Bible. Just saying it's a conceptual touchstone. It served many cultures throughout time, not all cultures, obviously, and it's brought people by fits and starts to the present day where we now feel that we can get by without it, and that may be the case. But to get rid of it, it's kind of like, and this is the segue, to get rid of it's sort of like pulling those statues down. Now, maybe you don't want the statue of the asshole in the middle of town. Maybe you want to put it in an asshole statue museum so we can all remember all the faces of all the ones that brought us here, so we can remember what it was like to go through those things. Because when we forget,
Right.
we lose the story, and when we lose the story, then we're just confused and sitting here in the present moment.
Let me see if I can go back to Spong. You're making some good points. I want to keep nuancing what this particular theologian is saying. He's not in that radical group. And so if I can state this, Bishop John Shelby Spong stated, "Love opens each of us to a dimension of the human experience that is transcendent." Let me repeat that. Love opens each of us to a dimension of the human experience that is transcendent. Love relates us to something that is real, but something that we can neither create nor destroy. God is the name by which we call this experience of love. So I ask you, is Spong trying to take people within the modality of Christianity? Is he attempting to take people into something that's not ethical or good? In other words, I keep asking, what if you had theologians like John Shelby Spong in the Great Debate? There are many out there. There are scores of theologians like Spong. And I'm talking about people who are extraordinarily good, that is, when it comes to the question of God. I keep saying that the majority of theologians do not believe that God exists. In fact, that conversation ended so many decades ago. And unfortunately, it's as if in the atheist camp, if you will, it's like atheists were not listening to what theologians were saying. Spong is saying that the theistic modeling that we've been doing for a long, long time, it's dead. If you ride a horse and it dies, get off of it. That's all he's saying. And I would think that would be useful in the Great Debate, because when it comes to the question of God, you don't know if there is a God or not. I don't know if there is a God or not. None of us know. Yet we have people claiming that they know that there is a God, and others who claim that there isn't a God. And so we have people who have climbed high, that is, within the framework of atheism, like Aron Ra. He claims to know that there are no gods. Being Gnostic, in that sense, my question would be, what methodology, what framework of science are you using to suggest such knowledge of God or not God? And so I love Aron Ra. I just wish that he would have people on his shows that are extremely articulate, that is, to the questions that are in theology. But, you know, it's like Saitan Bruggencate. He's a guy that makes a weak attempt at trying to put forth an argument concerning knowledge, which is absurd. And I don't know why that was such an entertaining thing for so many people. That's weird. So does that suggest that we are as dysfunctional as Psy, in that we want to listen to that kind of rhetoric? That's the challenge that I had on stage that night. I was saying, you know, the topic is simple. Is church harmful? We couldn't get at that because we were distracted because someone wanted, you know, to be a star, write a book, put out a video. That wasn't my interest. I truly want human beings to be able to get along. I wanted this gentleman to have a respectful conversation in our studio. He didn't do anything but try to cause, in a sense, a riot. I mean, when I was walking off stage, the people who were working for Saitan Bruggencate, they were calling me all kinds of names, trying to provoke me and provoke others, making people feel as if they were wretched, sinful, wicked. It was horrible. The experience here was horrible. That is, when it came to those of us who were in contact with those who were filming for Saitan Bruggencate and Eric Coven. That's a circus. I just don't know why people want to continue the circus to be the great debate. I would like to see the great debate become something that's useful, that's meaningful. And so if you think that I'm wrong, please take the time to write it out and I'll read it. I'm wrong a lot. And I'm listening. Go for it, Terry.
You're wrong. There you go. That makes you feel. Yeah. No, it's what's interesting is if we think about this, back when we were actually learning things. One of the better things about losing my career in 50-something in my life, I really didn't want to do. I thought I was going to just, I was at the top of what I did. I was saying to you earlier, again, before the show went on, I was a consultant. That's why it's, by the way, really difficult for me. And since Um's out there, probably he can hear this. It's really difficult for me because what I knew about how society is handled, what it took to feed and water a city and to clean it up afterwards. I understood the whole thing. I understood the whole thing at a point where I was being consulted nationally for my knowledge in systems that I designed and built. Now, I'm nobody. You won't find me any books because most people that actually do stuff like that, nobody ever heard of them. I was one of those people. So it's really difficult to sit there without the qualifications and try to talk to people about something like, bioremediation, about the cleanup of an environment, about the cost, the environmental cost of the city existing to begin with, because it's a failed experiment, and I think it can be improved upon, but people don't want to go through what they have to go through to improve. And all these things there are all these systems, and people have all this knowledge, that isn't really knowledge, and they have this information that's not really information. And it's an old thing from Proverbs, the righteousness of the perfect shall rectify his way. So if you're perfect, means you don't know everything, and you got to keep learning. You go, well, that kind of screws with the general idea what perfection is. Perfection means I've arrived, I've got it, don't need to learn anymore. I've become a Gnostic, as you're suggesting that R. Ra has. He's arrived. And I think, well, okay. But the only way you can arrive at knowing that life spontaneously generates from the arrow of entropic time, which is going the other damn way, if you haven't paid any attention, that life spontaneously generates at the end of the arrow of entropic time. And because it did it here via the Drake equation, it must have done it a whole bunch of other places. Now, we've never proved that. We don't know that. We just assume that. It may be the truth. Maybe the Drake equation hasn't made allowances for all sorts of other ways that life can come about. Then again, maybe life only happened here. That doesn't mean, therefore, God, but it does mean it's certainly unique enough that just to assume that this is a random thing whenever you get the proper aggregation of elements from exploded stars that fall together in space and a protoplanetary disk and suck together and become a world and cool down after the internal nuclear reaction cools to the point where maybe you can develop an atmosphere and maybe you can develop life and all these things. It's an incredible faith system. It's the theistic faith system that says that the story in Genesis is true. Young Earth creationist concept is pretty wild, but it's really not a whole lot more wild than this other idea that it's just like that. Both of them are rather magical thinking. The problem's much more complicated than either one of them address. And sure, if you go the path of real science, you're going to find people along the way, biologists and brilliant people along the way. They're far more able to define than you can ever afford to put in a short talk like this. But the simple fact that the complexity is mind-boggling, and all that complexity has to generate from a literally lifeless universe. So I think to just casually say, there's no God, is some dude sitting on a cloud touching fingers with the first man. I don't think that guy ever happened, but that there's no sentient life that originated things might be a little vague. My friend of mine liked to talk about the series of alien movies that resolved itself in Prometheus, where you got to see that indeed life was started by this alien that tossed life into this world and other worlds, and you go, yeah, but still the aliens got to come from somewhere. You end up with the infinite regress problem that sure we can come up with, it was put here by someone from somewhere else, but then they had to come from somewhere too. There are huge problems created, and just writing all that off anyway, and it is an enormous faith system. And to stand and say that you have a Gnostic grasp of atheism is to basically say that all that makes sense not only as a premise, but it makes sense to you and it's the truth. That's a faith system. I don't know. Don't mean to be harsh and judgmental, but that's just as much of a faith system as the one that I ran away from decades ago. I see you're back, so.
Yeah, I'm back. I think we need to end the show. I think we've had a lot of comments that have been really, really good. I've enjoyed reading them. And so let's do everyone a favor. Let's encourage people to be committed to a process, not a conclusion. Let's not get stuck on this or that. Let's continue to be about process, okay? With that said, we're going to get out of here. I don't know what's going to play, but it may be good, it may be bad. I don't know. We're out of here. Good night. We love you very much, okay? had to attend, unfortunately, a venue that is a young lady that, who we knew. She passed away. She's a lot younger than us. That is my wife and me. This is not always easy to deal with. And the reason that this show, and it's really not a show, it's just me sharing my thoughts on condemnation. I guess I'm tired of all the condemnation that atheists and theists alike put on each other. For years now, my wife has spent a lot of time trying to, quote unquote, minister to this young lady. She was in her early 50s, and now she's gone. The struggle in her life was that she lived in hell. Yes, she lived in hell. Her mom thought she was going to hell. And the reason that she lived in hell, it's because she wasn't heterosexual. Everyone in her family thought that she was going to burn and burn and burn and be tortured forever by this maniacal God, simply because she didn't give her heart and life to Jesus Christ. She didn't follow the rules and the regulations or the faith or whatever in baptism. She found someone that was of the same gender and fell in love with her. This is difficult. My wife kept telling her, hey, listen, you need to understand something about the text. And yes, sometimes you have to take people to the text, that is the biblical text, to demonstrate that, in a very measured way, Dr. Ann Nyland has done a lot of work. She's the best lexical theorist in the world. And yes, she has proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that none of these authors were writing, they were not authoring anything against homosexuality. And yet, people who live by the text, they don't want to live by the best of translation modeling. They commit themselves to these mindsets, these models that continue to make life hell on earth. And I guess my point is this, and it's simple. I'm not going to be long-winded tonight. I'm simply concerned because we have so many people. I'm being told that we have a very bad audio and video delay. Sorry. But here's my concern. The reason I'm hesitating, I'm trying to keep from crying because I'm a very sensitive person. We went to this event. It was out on the water, beautiful setting. All of these awesome people. Most of the people there were, part of the LGBT community, and hopefully you guys can accept that. And some of these people, they actually know what it means to grow up in hell. And simply because, they've heard all the condemnation all of their lives, and now one of their loved ones, one of our loved ones is now gone. They wanted to have just a little bit of hope. Yeah, just a little bit of hope. I'd love to see her again. Yes, I want to see her again. I hope she's looking down. In other words, people can come by, and yes, so many atheists are saying, get over it. There's, life after death, blah, blah, blah. Some people are just trying to destroy, the hope in these settings, and I just don't get that. I don't get the fundamentalist in Christianity, and I don't get the fundamentalist in atheism, because it seems like from time to time we may have to tell ourselves stories just to deal with our reality. And if any of you guys out there really think that we have an objective view toward reality, rethink that one. I mean, the best thing that we have going for us right now is a very, very subjective view of reality. And I guess my point is, why all of the condemnation? What motivates people to be so full of themselves that they don't mind preaching hellfire and brimstone to condemn them while they're alive, and then other people want to say, well, no, your loved one is just dead, no life after death. We don't know. I mean, but if this is just something for these people to pretend and say, hey, listen, no, she's looking down, whatever, why not give them that comfort? My grandson, sometimes he needs a teddy bear. I'm not going to take that away from him. I'm not going to take that away from him. These people are hurting. They need comfort. And I'm just tired of all the condemnation, and I hope that you are. Hopefully we can come together and have conversations that build one another up. Not in the faith, so to speak, but why can't we just get along? Why can't we have conversations that are about how we can better each other, that is, motivate each other toward something positive? And please understand, not all of us grew up in hell, but some of us did. And those of us who grew up in hell, sometimes we might write a theology simply to create a pathway of hope. What's wrong with that? And so this isn't really about philosophical debate at all tonight. This really isn't about that. This is about how people are struggling to survive. And so, for some of you, this will make sense. They sang several songs in celebrating her life. Then they asked us to take out this little thing that looks like this. I used to do this when I was a kid. Not very good at this. And the bubbles were all over the place. I mean, it was like a sea of bubbles. And these people were, hand in hand. We were there with them. People crying, smiling, rejoicing, reflecting, simply celebrating life. Some of them thinking, oh, she can see this. She can touch the bubbles. Bubbles was very much a part of who she was. I mean, she enjoyed that. And so my question is, can we live, that is in our conversations, that is in our relationships with each other, can we live without the condemnation? I think so. I don't think that we need to become so dogmatic on either side of the great debate that we start saying, no, you can't think this way. You're delusional. And so I'm going to advocate comfort. I'm going to advocate sometimes we may need comfort, and it may come in various forms for different people. We're not all the same. And so today, I celebrate. You may think I'm just blowing bubbles. But in reality, or in my construct of reality, I think Dr. Holman, I think is his name, he said that the brain actually constructs reality. In other words, what we sense is constructed by the brain, and then it's reconstructed and reconstructed and reconstructed. So objective reality, perhaps we need to blow some bubbles a little bit more and rethink that one. I hope that you can find it in yourself. I really do. I hope that you can find it in yourself to be kind. I hope that you can find it in yourself to comfort someone, simply to reach out and say, hey, listen, I can comfort you. I don't have to demand my own way. I don't have to get you to think like me. In fact, I want to read something for a moment. Makes sense to me. This particular psychiatrist states it this way. When you judge something, find a reliable source to learn more about it. I mean, isn't that true in all of our lives? So many people get stuck in, let's say, a Christian model or a Christian worldview. Perhaps we need to, instead of just accepting it, maybe we need to look at it. Let's look at some different sources and find its roots, look at the history, and the other side of the story, if you will. Yeah. Look at it through someone else's eyes. Number 2, this person, yes, a psychiatrist, says, challenge your mind when it gets trapped in confirmation bias. I've been there. I've been so full of myself for years. I admit, I've been, for the most part of my life, I lived indoctrinated. I don't know if all of it's gone. Probably 99% is still there. I don't know. But I do know that I need your help. And you need mine possibly from time to time. But I need to challenge. I need to challenge my own mind. And I can't challenge my mind sometimes by myself. I need someone to challenge me. But I need someone to do this in the context of humility sometimes. Because, you know, when people are harsh and condemning, it just doesn't work, does it? So this psychiatrist said, challenge your mind when it gets trapped in a confirmation bias or this mental set, quote unquote, or this belief that just stays there. Some of you know what I'm talking about, a belief that's just hangs on. It's like being anchored. It won't let go. This psychiatrist actually says these are all limiting. Yes, limiting to your existence. He goes on to say, practice expanding your sense of compassion. Listen to this. This is not me saying this. This is someone who really deals with behavior and all of that. Practice expanding your sense of compassion to those whom you don't know. In other words, if you're an atheist, reach to the other side of the coin. Reach out a little bit and say, hey, I need to expand, draw my circle a little bit larger. My circle of discourse. Wow, if it could be larger, what would that do for me? My circle of compassion. Move out of your comfort zone and expand your horizon. Practice unconditional regards. This author says, yes, this will be quite fulfilling as an experience. We're talking about, yes, something subjective, but that's all right. It's all right to be subjective. That is, when it comes to reality. That's going a little bit too far to say that we have an objective view. Number 4, learn to accept yourself. That's what she was going through. All of her life, she couldn't accept herself because she heard from the church, yes, from the church, all kinds of condemnation, hellfire and brimstone. You're not right with God. This standard of perfectionism was shoved down her throat. Everyone's worried, and my wife and I are sharing, hey, no, you've misunderstood the text. They're saying, heretic, heretic, heretic. We're not going to listen to you. We're praying for her salvation. She felt condemned all the days of her life, and from time to time, she felt loved by someone of the same sex. And those same people, the one she loved, the one that she bonded with, was in union with, She would like to think, yes, tonight, as she's hurting, she would like to think that she will be able to see her again. My question to you is, why condemn her and say, no, that's not going to happen. Let's look at all the empirical models, blah, 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 yeah. What's going on? As you can tell, I'm a bit tired because, when you're dealing with people in pain, people really suffering, they don't need all the blah, blah, blah. Philosophy will fail you. Philosophy is not good for everything. Hello? Come on, talk to me now. Philosophy is good within itself. It's not something that can work outside of its box. Yes, you've heard it here. Sometimes people get stuck in that box called philosophy. Learn to accept yourself, and only then you can project that onto others. Wow, that's a powerful thing. It may be true that I can read, that is, from what a pen does on paper, that is from the viewpoint of a psychiatrist, and this may be better than what I read in the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, or Acts, Romans, and the rest of these books. It may be better, but sometimes what people feel is condemnation. They feel pushed. And if we will simply say, just give it a try, read some of this. Learn to accept yourself. I remember growing up as a person who could not accept myself for who I actually was, simply because I was told that I was wicked, I was wretched, I was, not good enough to even stand in God's presence. And so at the age of 4, I had to get saved. And so it felt positive to me. I want you to hear this. It felt like a positive thing to me to be saved and sanctified by the washing and the cleansing aspects of the blood of Jesus. I felt saved. I felt good. I felt all of those things. And so that which I counted as positive was actually working against me. Now, it wasn't someone who got dogmatic with philosophy that changed me. What changed me was when I met and was confronted by people who were ever so kind and humble and gentle. And so in time I changed. I could go on, but here's my point. Atheists and theists alike need to quit condemning one another. We need to have a conversation, and our conversation needs to be seasoned with gentleness, with understanding. And yes, when we're having a conversation, very little of what we are talking about, very little in that exchange will we actually understand at that particular time. In other words, what we're hearing surface structure. We're hearing words. And yes, when I hear you and you hear me, typically what we do is we render it so quickly, we don't even give enough time for the deeper structure. That is the intent of the author and all of that. God forbid that we dig into that. Wow. I do apologize about the audio and the video. This wasn't set up to do this tonight, but this is how it goes sometimes. And so, I don't know about you, but I would rather be a person who has a sense of balance, a lot of compassion. If your strong suit is philosophy, please understand that others may have a strong suit, and it may be sociology. Someone else may have a strong suit, and it may be humility. Someone else may have a strong suit, and it may be maybe just to be able to sing a song. I don't know. But let's work with each other's strengths instead of against each other's weaknesses. I'm simply saying that I saw a lot of people suffering, And we were hurting as well. And I would hate to think that what I hear in the great debate would have been good for anyone there this evening. With that said, I hope that you will join us again and again and again. Let's try to make sense of this mess. Let's do better, okay? We love you very much.